Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this morning, and thanks to everyone who's taken time throughout the state to join us via the media site link. So this morning we'll start with some opening remarks, as usual, from Kathy, and then thanks to Joe Polisek and Mike Brune, we'll have some updates on the budget, everything that we know to date that's going on with JFC, and then Amber will share with us some of the at-risk process updates. We'll go then to a question and answer with Mike Brune, and hopefully we'll be able to answer. We know that there are a lot of questions, and we'll do our best to answer them today. So without further ado, Kathy.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning out in the field. Good morning. I see we have standing room only in here, so it looks like everyone's already moved to the center, so there are no more chairs. So, okay. Thank you. First thing, I just want to start out by apologizing for moving the meeting around. I know that presents a lot of challenges for everybody in your calendars, and we appreciate how many of staff across the state tune into these, and I'm sure that kind of jerked around your schedule a little bit, so my apologies for that. We just wanted to get past a certain point of joint finance hearings, and of course, since we don't know necessarily until a day before, sometimes 2 days before, when we're actually going to be up on their schedule, we just kind of had to keep it a little bit more fluid this time. So I appreciate you moving your schedules around to accommodate us. So we've got, a little bit more, as Jenny said, to be able to fill you in on the process and let you know where we stand as of today. We're certainly not through the gauntlet yet, but we're getting close, so we're feeling pretty good about that. What we're hearing from staff during these times is a lot about, we want more information, and then I'm hearing from staff, don't keep sending us information when you don't have any information. So we're trying to find the center lane there and give you just what you need to know as we come across the information to keep you informed as best as we can. Certainly there's sensitivities surrounding at-risk staff. And the thing I really want to relay to everybody here is that we take that very, very seriously. These are difficult times, and it's not just for at-risk staff, but it's certainly for coworkers of at-risk staff, and obviously friends, people who are concerned about each other in the DNR family. And so we've certainly had to follow a very rigid process of who we notify when and how we're doing that. So there are very strict rules and guidelines by which we have to operate under. So again, sometimes I wish we could be saying more, but yet we have to be sensitive to the needs of those first impacted on the front lines of at-risk status. So I appreciate your understandings there. We're listening, and we're going to keep listening, like we've been doing since I walked in the door, is listening, learning, empathizing, sympathizing many times with some of the challenges and concerns that everybody's got. I will also want to express to you that while it may feel sometimes, at least it has to us felt like sometimes, that we're the only ones that are under fire, right? Sometimes it feels like that. We're not. There are a lot of agencies that are going through changes and challenges in their funding, et cetera, and we're all working at a cabinet level as a team together. I'm really thankful for the support from my cabinet colleagues from other agencies when it comes to some of our at-risk employees who have just been, look, what can we do to help you? How can we help you maneuver through this? What can we do to help save some of these people that, we want to make sure that land on their feet at the end of this in the event that they do move on to a different agency. So again, it's important that I publicly acknowledge the cabinet secretaries at other agencies who've been very supportive as well. There's some wrong information out there. I'm sure that shocks you. So there's a lot of misinformation that gets out in the press. I'm sure that shocks you too. So it's important that you guys understand we can't always go and do the back and forth stuff in the media and that's all I would do all day long, every day, frankly, since I walked in the door if I did that for a living. So a lot of times we have to kind of pick the things that we're trying to clarify in the media, the things that we find are most important overall to the agency. So again, it's difficult sometimes, and I'm asking for your continued patience on that. The media, again, likes to have things that they can kind of grasp onto, if it's a rumor or innuendo, or frankly just an outright falsehood, and run with it, because it generates excitement, and it's not positive excitement. So again, I feel it, and I'm with you in that, so you need to know that we're trying to be real sensitive to that too. Talking about process and guidelines at the at-risk process now that we're going through, I want to give very public thanks and extreme appreciation to Amber, who is now our new HR Bureau Director, to Diane Brookbank, who's now our case division leader, to all of our teams, our DLT teams, our administrators. I mean, this is a huge undertaking. Frankly, I had no idea what a Jenga puzzle this is. I think I'm dating myself when I say Jenga puzzle. Do the young people here know what Jenga is? Okay. Or House of Cards? Maybe that's better. But you know, one little piece that you take out, right, sets the whole thing tumbling. And so it's a really, really difficult process. We've also had help from HR at DOA, who's been helping us too. I've never seen anything like this process before. It's really quite challenging. So I just want to thank them for their leadership and their clarity of vision during that too. The other thing I want to talk about is budget themes, and this is important for me to repeat over and over again, and I don't think I've done enough of that, which is it's not about singling out people, it's about smaller government, okay? It's about right-sizing government, and that feels personal when it's you, or when it's somebody that sits next to you, and I understand that, and my job is to make sure that, first of all, I'm relaying to you what the governor's goals are in this budget, and then equally important is that I'm relaying effectively to the governor what the effects of those things are. And I've been doing that quite emphatically and helping them understand some of the challenges that we're being presented with. A couple other things I want to talk about is prioritizing our core work. There's been some kind of scuttlebutt going on out there, and people are saying, you know, why are we not issuing press releases on this, that, or the other thing anymore? Why are we dialing back on some of this work? This is about really identifying what are our core deliverables to our customers with the understanding and the reality that's really hit us in the face this budget session, which is the legislature and the governor expect us to focus on our core work that directly ties to our mission, right? Some of the things we've always done that we love to do that are what I like to call the glitter and rainbows, the positive punches of DNR, we have to start dialing back on because we're still got the same amount of work, right? And we're going to have less people to do that work. And so we have to acknowledge that and actually embrace it. And we're going to be going through exercises to start identifying more throughout each division and program. And we're going to be, you know, obviously reaching out to staff across the state as well at different points through different programs and methods on what those core deliverables are and how are we successful at providing that back to our customers. So some of the things like, and a good example is press releases, right? People are like, well, we always issue press releases on this, that, or the other. Well, OC has got some cuts, man, right? That's going to be the understatement of the day. So we don't have the capacity anymore, we won't going forward, to be able to do all those things anymore. So we're, again, management, we're looking at how do we restructure that, how can we still deliver as much as we'd like to, maybe we can't, and therefore what do we have to? So just so you understand from a management perspective, that's what we're looking at, is what is our capacity. You know, I've told you guys this a million times, right? I value every single thing that you do. And it impresses me, and I'm awestruck by the work that we do, the breadth of issues that we cover, the ways we touch everybody's lives, a million different ways in Wisconsin. The work we do is really important, and please know that we're continuing to emphasize that with the legislature, with joint finance members. We've been actually very successful so far, and I wish I had wood to knock on right now, and I don't, but, right? So, but we've actually been very effective at managing some proposals that didn't come forward in joint finance. And those are the things you don't see, right? Those are the things you just see what actually ends up happening or what's actually at the committee, what motions actually get drafted and talked about. But there are things that were being talked about that didn't get drafted. And I want to publicly thank Kurt and Mike for their extraordinary, I don't want to say activism, that has a negative tone.
No, please don't.
But it's kind of like that. But advocacy, okay? That's not a great word either. Help me out.
Let me try.
Thank you.
I guess what I would just say is this is my first budget process, kind of working through this.
And welcome to the deep end of the pool. Yes.
And it's been an amazing learning experience. When Kathy said, you know, welcome to the deep end, you were right.
That's right.
And I just want to thank Mike, Tim Gary, I guess is another one that's been part of this, Kathy for her leadership, division administrators for their work. It's about relationships and the importance of those relationships and immediacy of being available. And so whatever term we give it, it's been an impressive team effort that I've seen firsthand. So.
It's educating. That's the word, right?
Educating.
We've been educating policymakers, again, over the pros and cons of different things that we hear. And we're not just acting on actual motions that have been drafted. We're acting on rumors. So as soon as we hear something's in the air, we're hauling it across the street and trying to educate different members of finance and other members of the legislature who have what are called budget buddies, where they work different issues through different people on the Joint Finance Committee that are kind of tasked with different issue areas, and making sure that they're educated. Again, we don't want to go in against or for, but we want to come in and say, okay, we're hearing this, so here's the pros and cons, and now maybe we can help you make a good decision here. That's been very effective. Extraordinarily so. In fact, I think this has probably been the most effective budget session where we've had the most impact prior to votes being taken. So I'm really appreciative of these guys. They've done a fantastic job. There are no guarantees, right, in life. And I know that it's really difficult in tumultuous times to trust and to wait and to be patient. But I'm going to ask you to do that. And I hope that you know that the past 4.5 years that I've been here, that I have said it to you straight. It's not always the best news that I've had to deliver to you. You don't always agree with me, and I get that too. But at least know that my #1 responsibility is the best integrity and sustainability of this agency moving forward for generations to come. And you all do that every single day with the work that you do, and my job is to communicate that. And I'm going to continue to do that in a very passionate way. Okay? So with that, next on the agenda.
Joe and I are going to do a budget update. I think Joe's going to run our play-by-play, and so he'll be Al Michaels, and I'll be Chris Collinsworth doing the color commentary.
Why Chris Collinsworth?
Because that's the Monday night crew, or the Sunday night crew.
Why can't we go back to the old Monday night crew? Gifford.
Howard.
Well, Howard, all right.
No, Frank Gifford's not dead.
No, he's not
No,
dead.
he's not dead.
Okay. Moving on.
Well, he can
We'll
be
work this
Summerall,
out.
and I'll be Madden, because he said I needed to mix in
I
a
like that.
salad.
Summerall and Madden.
Why can't somebody be,
Too many turduckets for you.
let's be Wisconsin about this.
That's right.
Your
That's
map
right, sister.
location.
I'm with you. Can
All
you
right,
see?
so very quickly before I hand it off to Joe to do our sort of play-by-play on the budget, I just wanted to let you guys know, as Kurt and Kathy mentioned, we're over there every day that the Department of Natural Resources has an agenda item up before Joint Finance Committee. So that's been now 5 days that we have camped out over in the east wing of the state capitol. It's long days some days. We have to sit there and wait through other agencies. But that's when a lot of the work really gets done. That and the 10:45 at night phone calls with our budget buddy, or the 2.5-hour phone calls on a Sunday afternoon walking through the motions, what prospective ideas might do, what thought processes are going in behind those ideas, and trying to explain what the consequences or what the ramifications of a budget motion moving forward or not moving forward. So it's been an education process through a great deal of this. We've got a lot of new members on the Joint Finance Committee. So, and both of the members who are dealing with our issue areas as our leads are new to the Joint Finance Committee. So really working with them and explaining to them the Jenga puzzle, as Kathy put it. One of the ones was the environmental management account that was a Jenga puzzle, and explaining to them that while there are 9 different Joint Finance Committee papers that the Legislative Fiscal Bureau put together, really it's one big cohesive package and should be looked at as one big large motion to try and balance that account. So it's been a real education process. We've been over there, your management team, each and every day that we're up, and we figure that we've got at least 1, maybe 2 more days that we'll be over there. Still to come. So it's still a process that's ongoing. With that, I'm going to hand over to Joe for a sort of a recap, and I'll drop in commentary.
Sounds great. Well, as Mike has said, we've been going for a few weeks here now, and this is just to give you a little background on how the Joint Finance Committee works and how they work with the Legislative Fiscal Bureau, which is obviously their budget office. The Fiscal Bureau has our agency divided into topical areas. So far we've done the fish and wildlife and recreation, environmental quality, parks, forestry, our non-point funding. As Mike was saying, we potentially have what they call department-wide and also an area on stewardship where they might be consolidated. But those are kind of our big budget groups. And so they do a topic area by topic area. Now, I'm not going to go into the variety of actions that occurred on each of those. I'll try to do my overview thing here fairly quickly to give you all more time for questions. But the biggie in the first one on April 22nd was the condition of the Fish and Wildlife account. Now, the Fish and Wildlife account has been kind of in a structural deficit. In other words, our expenditure authority is more than the revenues we take in on a yearly basis. And so the legislature was looking at of trying to fix that, and they had a couple of options. One would have cut like 25 positions from the department. Another one would have cut 13 and a half. So this is one of those cases where a half a loaf is better than none, and so they did reduce Department of Fish and Wildlife expenditures by about $1 million and 13 and a half additional FTE. A little bit I'm going to get into our whole FTE cut thing.
In the second year of the biennium.
That was the good news. As opposed to many of the cuts that are included in the budget, this particular one was made effective in the second year, giving us additional time to get vacancies or manage that additional 13 and a half position cut. In addition to that, on that day, you know, they looked at car-killed deer appropriations and refunded that with forestry account money. They did some conservation warden overtime, some recreational vehicle reestimates, looked at deleting the Class B bear license. So as you can see, it's kind of a wide, diverse sort of number of activities. The next day then that we were up was May 5th, and that was the Environmental Quality Day. And that's the Jenga puzzle that Mike was talking about, which is the environmental management account. It too was projected to be in deficit, kind of a reoccurring theme for some of our accounts, you know, just the way the economy's been and all. And so they have had a variety, the governor's package included a variety of techniques to address that deficit. And one of the techniques was a reduction of $4 million in the first year of the biennium for recycling grants going to municipalities, taking it down from 19 million to 15 million. You know, that sounds hard for municipalities, but for us it was a key in balancing that account and maintaining our operations. There's a variety of other things that were built into it. Now with this one, like 4 of the big elements in balancing this account are still, they still haven't addressed those, have they, Mike?
We have a number of agenda items that will be taken up during the UW Systems overall budget because they were transfers out of our environmental management account that go to the university system. So they're going to be looking at the university system in its totality, including 4 of the issue papers that were supposed to be taken up under DNR's environmental management or environmental quality day.
So we keep an eye out for that, and hopefully as a result of those we'll be, you know, still in a strong position where we can avoid operations reductions or further reductions to our grants. But on that particular day, in addition to dealing with that environmental management account status, they did another 19 different topic areas, including contaminant sediment bonding, well compensation grant appropriations, and a variety of things. One thing that was originally in the governor's budget that was taken out that day was the transfer of the private septage program. It was going to come from DISPIS to DNR, along with 9 FTE and some revenue sources for the account. But that transfer was not made, so water won't be having some new colleagues, I guess.
Yeah. They also extended the PECFA program for a couple more years and extended out the life cycle by which we can close out those cases that are brought in by 3 years past the front door getting closed, and then the back door gets closed on when we have to get them all through the system.
Okay, then the next day that week, that would have been Thursday on May 7th, they addressed our parks and forestry funding and our whole package. One of the big things in there was our parks account funding. You know, as in the governor's budget took away about $4.9 million worth of GPR funding for our parks program and brought back about $3.6 million worth of expenditure authority funded by parks fees. and had a little bit of a fee increase in there, $3 on annual stickers, and some camping fee increases. What the Joint Finance Committee did was make up the difference and added back an additional $1.3 million worth of Parks Expenditure Authority, bringing the Parks budget back up to about $17 million in total funding as it is in the current fiscal year. So that was a nice little victory for Parks. And in addition to that, the committee also, very much unlike them, but very aware of, the needs and sympathetic to the needs of the park program, passed additional fee increases. So they increased resident daily admission, daily and resident and non-resident by $1, increased trail passes by $1 from $4 to $5, electrified campsites from $5 to $10 a day. So these fee increases in total would generate about $2.5 million of new revenue for parks in the first year and about $3.1 million in the second year. So it's kind of a good news thing. I mean, before this, without that additional funding, there were pretty severe cuts to Parks LTE funding and to Parks Supplies and Services funding. So this should give us the opportunity for the next 2 years to be able to continue to run our parks at the levels that we have been used to.
This is a real good example of our team working together with the legislature to address issues that were brought to us through the process of the budget. Kurt and Tim and our team went in and met with legislators, key legislators, put together a package that meets our needs, provides us additional funding. But what it really does, the most important thing that it does is it gives us that expenditure authority to spend those resources so that we can hire the right number of LTEs to make sure that our parks are properly maintained and staffed this summer.
Okay, another thing that was in there during that day was the governor's budget had eliminated funding for state park, forest, and riverway roads. It's about $2 million a year that we use for repairs on our own properties, our own roads. But also a third of that money, $600,000 or so, is used as grants to local units of government, towns, counties, whoever, for roads that they have that go through our properties. So the funding for that was restored. Another good news item on that day for our budget. Some of the forestry things that went into that day. The bill, you probably hear about this, and so just to give you a little heads up, it's called Good Neighbor Authority. And that was passed in the bill. What it does, if you hear about it, it means that the state of Wisconsin Forestry can work on federal forest lands in a cooperative agreement. So we upfront the money to develop forest management plans and timber harvesting plans on the federal forests. The feds, like us, are also in financial trouble, so they have to cut back on their management. But they're reaching out to states to get involved in these cooperative efforts to manage forests. We would get to retain 10% of those funds to repay us for our efforts. And on an ongoing basis, the work that we do in the timber that we'd harvest would also, revenues from that would go to upgrade infrastructure on forest lands, so trails, campsites, all that good thing. So it's kind of a win-win for both the state and the feds. So that was another very nice thing included. There was a closed acreage fee grant program built in. So a lot of property around the state, forest, timbered property, is in what's called the managed forest law, which means the landowner gets a break. Part of the property tax break is dependent upon them having the land open for hunting. In some cases, landowners choose not to have their land open. They then pay a higher fee. That higher fee is then collected, and with this program, $1 million a year of it is returned back to the local governments, with 80% going to the town or village, 20% going to the county. So it's a new grant program that was put in place on this, in this package.
This is, just like with parks, this is another example of our team pulling together and making sure that we had all the information to every legislator who sits on Joint Finance Committee. So Tim, Gary, and Paul's team, Joe, obviously, Kurt, myself, working the phones, making sure that we kept everyone abreast of what was the impacts of potential motions that made it, motions that didn't make it. I know that Kurt and I were on the phone at about 10:30 that night. I followed up with another conversation with our budget buddy in the assembly and went through the last couple of different things at 10:45, 11 o'clock at night. So really trying to burn up the phone lines and make sure that everyone has the information at hand before they vote on a motion. So this is another example of our team really pulling together, making sure that we're educating the legislature.
See, then the last one that we had up there, if it is around, was basically, the May 12th. So that would have been yesterday. So we're bringing you up through yesterday.
Yes, it was.
And how time flies.
He's in charge of numbers. So
I noticed I didn't have a space between the May 15th and 2015, the comma on the introductory page. That was kind of disconcerting when I was watching that. But yesterday was non-point funding. It was primarily characterized as a DAT cap thing. But we had a fair amount of interest in that particular package as well, mostly because, like the environmental management account, like the fish and wildlife account, the non-point account was in some financial trouble as well. So there were a few things that were done in the governor's package to take care of that. One was $1 million a year transfer from the DATCAP Ag Chem Fund to the non-point account, which was retained yesterday by the legislature, and a variety of other, items that had been reduced by the governor to try to finance the account. As re-estimates were done of tipping fee revenues coming into the account, it was found that additional revenue was available, and as a result of that, the legislature added back several things, including several DNR items. One was for the TRIM non-point grants, so that's like our rural non-point. We've got the bonding side, but then we have a cash side, which goes for planning and development, which you can't bond for, was zeroed out in the governor's budget, but $100,000 a year was restored yesterday. We've got the urban non-point program that was cut by $500,000. Yesterday, an additional $200,000 was restored. Non-point contracts, which are contracts that we have with UW Extension, providing, advice and technology out to rural landowners, was increased by $770,000 yesterday. On the bonding side, there were a few reductions made in the amounts of bonding that the governor had included in his budget. But given the atmosphere and the attitude towards bonding up in the Capitol, this is kind of another one of those maybe more than a half a loaf things. So our targeted runoff management program, TRIM bonding, was reduced from $7 million to $5.9 million available for the department to make available in grants to property owners. And our urban and municipal flood control grant program was reduced from $5 million to $3 million, but dollars still then remain available. So that kind of brings us through the joint finance actions.
Before we move on that, just real quick.
Yep.
So you've probably heard me say a couple of times that we've been educating. I think that while we're all experts or try to be experts on these topics, and everybody in this room is an expert on their particular area of expertise, we have legislators who are leading up our budget section, but then also leading up sections that deal with MA over at DHS, or are also the lead for DATCAP. So while we've got to build them up and make them experts on our budget, you've got other agencies that are doing the same thing. And I've had lots of people who've asked, well, they just don't understand, or if you could just make sure that, if you could just tell them that these are the things, and that's what we're trying to do. But there's lots of competing forces on them for their time and their expertise and their knowledge. They're up there then having to sell all of the motions that they're making and trying to sound like they are an expert and they know exactly what all of these things are doing. So it's really a really difficult task that these members have, trying to make sure that they are knowledgeable on all of these different areas. And that's why it's taken our team a lot of time and a lot of effort, but it's been time and effort that's been very well spent, because this has been, in my third budget cycle here, this has been our most successful budget, I think. And we've seen, we haven't seen random motions that are flying without us having some input. We're not seeing, last minute things that just sort of get tacked on and, oh, by the way, surprise, here, you're going to have to deal with this. There's been a real willingness to work with us and bring us into the process, and that has been incredibly helpful for us to be as successful as we've been in the Joint Finance Committee.
I want to add just a couple things. One is you're hearing, Joint Finance added back in things from the governor's original budget that he introduced. But what's important to remember is the governor, when he puts his budget together, is going on estimates of what we're projecting to see. And then at this point in the year, we're actually able to see, well, how much money do we actually have? So the legislature at this point in the process actually has the luxury of knowing exactly what we really do have versus having to be real conservative like the governor's had to do. Like, what if the sky starts to fall and we don't have these monies? Let's not, just like you do at home, right? I've talked about this a million times with you too. So it's the same thing as like all of a sudden you get that big bonus commission check that you weren't sure you were going to get, and now you can go on vacation. So it's that same kind of thought process. You plan for the worst, hope for the best, and thankfully we've been seeing some good strong numbers coming in on some of these accounts as well as GPR. One other thing I wanted to talk about, and Mike touched on this, is I've heard from lots of staff throughout this process, and I welcome your input. But it's important to remember we are a really small, tiny piece of state government in the big picture of things. And there is a very heavy, heavy demand on GPR because there are human needs in other agencies that we are competing for those same dollars. Things like the safety and health and welfare of people in mental institutions, mental illness facilities. I'm trying to think of the right. K-12 education, the UW. There are huge, huge demands on those same dollars many times that we're going back for and saying, this is really important too. And they're like, Kathy, we understand, upgrading a pit toilet's important to you. But, we've got issues over here of security in the prisons or whatever it might be. And so that's the other thing is, and sometimes it's hard to do that, right? And I'm not going to kid you. I've been struggling with this because I'm like, come on, this is really important. Why don't they see that? And they go, Stepp, remember, we've got bigger things up here too at play for those same dollars. And when they give me examples of some of those, I'm like, oh gosh, right, I get it. Because sometimes when you're so far in, it's hard to see out and to see what the bigger part, the bigger role that we play contributing to everything. So those are a couple things I just wanted to stress, is that while we see those as really important because you're in that program every day and it's something really important to you to deliver good quality products and services back to our customers, there are other demands on those dollars that are very real as well.
Yeah, I think a real life example for us was looking at, let's say, parks funding. Okay, so we lost $4.9 million worth of GPR funding for parks. Okay, so we got partially restored with seg fees. But you can see there's still, although Kathy says there's this demand for the GPR out there to go for education or Medicare or this or that, they still were aware enough and recognized our situation enough that they dealt with it,
That's right.
And they did get us the fee revenues back to restore our program. The same thing with that Park and Forest Roads thing that I was talking about. That had been $2 million worth of GPR. Well, given who we're battling with for that GPR, we weren't going to get that back, but they knew it was a problem. So they gave us back $2 million as forestry money, which is sort of, half a loaf again because it's focused on that one account. But the fact of the matter is they recognized the problem, they knew they couldn't deal with it with GPR, and they gave us funding. So,
one other thing I was remiss in doing, and that is recognizing and thanking Joe and his budget shop. These guys, we want to talk about the late night calls that we're on, and we're like, oh, poor us, right? We're running around late. These guys are up all night, running numbers, crunching numbers, getting us the information really fast, sometimes within minutes. When I've asked for, what is this going to do to this account or that account? Boom, we've got it within minutes, and we get it over to the legislators right away. We have blown the doors off of those guys at Joint and ladies at Joint Finance and their staff on how responsive we have been with good information. And I cannot tell you how proud I am of these guys in the budget shop because, Joe, hats off to you guys. An exemplary performance I haven't seen before until this year, so it's just outstanding work.
No, thanks. My thanks to my crew too. Once again, always there. The volume of questions and work they get from the Fiscal Bureau is amazing. So, and all of those responses, and a lot of you have been involved in those Fiscal Bureau questions too. So So a big hats off and thanks to all of the program people that have had to go with individual questions after questions from the Fiscal Bureau.
Yeah, if you've
So
gotten
thanks.
one, multiply that by about, what, 100 or 1,000?
Yeah.
And that's what our budget shop's dealing with.
So, I mean, this has been a total department team effort in responding to these Fiscal Bureau questions during
Thank you,
finance.
Joe.
It's been great. Is that the end of the love-in now, or?
No, I'm all about love.
Okay.
And by the way, that was dating yourself by saying love it.
Yeah.
That was kind of a laugh in 1960s thing you just did.
I don't think it's any secret. Okay, so then we'll go off from some of the specific issues and just give you kind of a summary overview of the, or not, there it is.
There it is.
What kind of the big picture of our position reductions, because a lot of these position reduction things drive a lot of the interest, you know, obviously that we're seeing in the room today. And just to try to describe to you how we kind of got to where we are at this point. Now, this chart is going to be laid out by the divisions with our highlight bureaus down here in office. And what it's going to show you is what the original reductions were in the budget at 80. And then the Joint Committee on Finance's Fish and Wildlife reductions an additional 13.35. So you can see, and these are just the big ones. There's other little items that tinker here and there, but it's not worth talking about. But right now, we've got cuts on board of about 93.35, okay? Our total authorized positions right now on PMIS are about 2,650. So the question may be, why were certain classifications put at risk? Why did the department make decisions to cut positions the way they did? Well, the way it works in the budget process is specific positions are cut in, not positions, but numbers of positions are cut in appropriations and bureaus within the department. We retain the flexibility to determine which positions get cut, okay? So if we look at, for example, lands, in total 17 and a half, 18, 19 positions out of 493, they're in pretty good shape as far as vacancies able to handle that. Same thing with forestry at 9, aware at 5.5, law enforcement at 1.5, 10.19 in water, which is primarily fisheries. Fisheries has maintained a lot of vacancies. Case at 8, well, and then the 5.752, yeah, so 15 and 3, and it's 0.75 in law enforcement. Case at about 11.6, but where we really got hit hard, as everyone knows, is in science services, was specifically cut 18.4 FTE out of 58.4. Office of Communications was specifically cut 10 FTE out of 17.8. So when we look at those two specific bureaus, you know, what makes up the positions in those bureaus? Well, science services is obviously scientists and techs. And Office of Communications is going to be communication specialists and educators. So the way OSER defines the at-risk process is, if you want to give individuals in those at-risk areas whose positions have a high chance of getting cut an opportunity to seek other employment, you got to put them at risk. And you don't just put the people in those bureaus at risk, but everybody in that classification. So as a result of that, you saw at risk, notices rippling through other parts of the department, particularly in the educator area, some in communications, maybe one scientist position in ER outside of this. But the impact was in wildlife educators, parks educators, a couple, 2 or 3 in aware. So that's kind of how that happened, the ripple effect happened, and fisheries. But that's just an explanation of the mechanics of how we got to that with the loss of the 93 and the fact of the way they were distributed and hit these specific areas without the capacity to cover them all within.
Hand it off, I think, now to Amber.
Do you want to talk about the timeline?
Oh, certainly. Sorry about that. So as we talked about, budget process that's still ongoing. As I said at the last town hall, it's a long process. They're still looking to get done. It's probably going to be the week after Memorial Day now. The hope was to be done the week before Memorial Day. Looks like they're probably going to bleed into that week after Memorial Day. That will conclude the Joint Finance Committee's actions on the budget. It will then go to the two houses where they will take votes. There'll be lots of amendments that are introduced. It is extraordinarily rare when the two houses are controlled by the same party that there are amendments that are added. So the budget package that makes it out of Joint Finance Committee will by and large be pretty intact when it goes through both houses and then on to the governor's office for potential line item vetoes. Signatures still will occur on or before July 1st of this year. All right.
Say that again, that timeline, so
Certainly.
what's the Memorial Day,
That's when Joint Finance Committee will wrap up their votes on amendments.
before or right after?
Right, somewhere right around there. It's not a set date. They're working through. They've still got some pretty big things to work through, non-DNR things, obviously. It then goes to, after they have their wrap-up last vote, they vote on the budget in its totality. It goes to the two standing houses, so the Senate and the Assembly. They will vote on those packages, and then it gets forwarded on to the governor's office, and the governor will make line item vetoes. That all occurs before July 1st. All right?
Amber, welcome to the deep end of the pool.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. This is just going to be a quick overview because I want to make sure we do leave time for questions, but just want to kind of give you an update on what we've done to date as far as the at-risk process and then sort of what some of our next steps are going forward. So we started during the week of April 20th with meeting with each of our staff that are in one of those at-risk classifications that Joe mentioned. So that's the educator series, the communications specialist, research scientist, and research tech. And we currently have 58 staff that fall within those classifications. So we have 58 people who were put at risk. And what that meant is that we met with them, and when I say we, it was somebody from Human Resources, usually the immediate supervisor, sometimes the next supervisor up, and in most instances, one of our secretary's directors. Sat down with the individuals, explained to them what the at-risk process is. They were given a letter explaining that. We've provided information packets, HR contact information so they know where to go with questions, online resources, and that has continued throughout this process. We are updating things almost on a daily basis, sending out new information as it becomes available. We've also followed up with all of those staff to see if they have additional questions, what other resources we can provide to them. The week of on April 28th, we sent out LTE notification letters to supervisors who have LTEs in those classifications. So these are not at-risk letters, but those LTEs were advised that they are in an impacted classification and that should we be forced to lay off FTEs in that class, that they'd be released from the agency. That is not a foregone conclusion, but we want folks to understand what the situation is. So we wanted to provide them with that information. We have begun putting up jobs on Whiskers. So Whiskers is like Whisk Jobs, but it's only available to staff who have been placed at risk. And the positions that we're putting up have been taken from lists prepared by the divisions of their critical fills. And so we're looking for positions that are in counterpart pay ranges for folks who are at risk so that we can look at some transfer opportunities, looking for positions that might be a good fit for folks that are in those classifications, depending on what their skill sets are. Currently, we have 26 DNR positions that are on Whiskers. Other state agencies are posting there as well, so there's lots of different opportunities, but those are the positions that we've put up. And we started putting those up last week. So last Tuesday, the first round went up, and we've put several more positions up since then. Our staffing group has been doing a great job getting those jobs announced and out there. And the first jobs have to be posted on Whiskers for a minimum of 8 days. And since we're on a tight time frame here, we are putting them up for 8 days and then taking them down. So the first of those jobs actually closed today. So we'll have a couple more that close in the next few days. So we've got folks that are exploring those opportunities as well. Last week, we also sent out a message to all at-risk staff, inviting them to participate in a survey about HR consultation services. So resume writing, interview skills, just help understanding, navigating the civil service process. So those results, we're evaluating them this week, and then we'll start offering some of the more desired services to folks. We do intend to extend similar services to LTEs, though it'll need to be on a more restricted basis just because of logistics and potentially the number of folks impacted, but there will be resources made available. And then lastly, our layoff plan, and I'll explain real quick kind of what that means, was due to OSER originally May 22nd. We requested and received an extension of that deadline to June 1st. So that'll give us a little additional time to conduct interviews with folks, hopefully place some at-risk staff before we have to submit that layoff plan. And what the layoff plan does is it explains who is impacted by the reductions. We provide a seniority list, whether any exemptions are being applied, and an anticipated notice and layoff dates. And that document is a fluid document. It's not written in stone. We submitted on June 1st. That doesn't mean we're held to that. That's really just a snapshot of where we're at on that date and what we're expecting. I think that's my update. So we'll hand it off. All right.
Well, thank you very much, all of you, for providing us with the insights about all the efforts that have been going on, and I'm sure there's much, much more that we don't see, but we're grateful for all that you've done. So we know that there will be many, many questions to follow up on some of the topics we've discussed here. So would you prefer, Mike, are you queued up to go to the field right away, or should we start
I've got a couple, but if you want to start here.
Okay. Let's start in the room. So let's go to questions. So we'll start right here.
Thanks. Hi, this question, so you talked a lot about how you're educating the Joint Finance Committee about loss of function that might happen with these cuts. So what I've heard publicly from you guys regarding loss of function with the science cuts has been more along the lines of indicating there won't be a loss of function because we have a lot of ISTs in the agency. Can you expand on what your actual position is about that? Do you imply that other people who happen to have an IST in their title would do the same research that the research scientists do now? Or do you acknowledge that there would be a loss of research function?
So when I'm talking externally about these position reductions in that particular area of the agency, and when I say things like we've got ISTs all over the agency, it's to address the criticism that we're eliminating science from the agency. So that has become kind of like this conventional wisdom talking point that the department was getting rid of science. And so I said, look, first of all, we have to step back and understand that, and when I say ISTs, I don't mean that disrespectfully. I'm trying to communicate to the public who doesn't know that we have hydrogeologists, hydrologists, biologists, lots of ISTs at the end of their name, just to kind of encompass, we've got lots of science within all the different things that we do in DNR. So the research division is different than the other science work that's going on all the time in the agency. So it was to address that, which was starting to kind of penetrate, and people were like, well, you're not going to have any science people left in the agency. I'm like, no, that's not at all how we're structured. So that was the intention of my comments there. When we talked about, first of all, we're not exactly sure how many, I mean, I don't think we've come to the point of how many actual people, right? We haven't determined how many people would actually be lost through this exercise yet, so we're not there. So I'm not prepared to say whether or not we would actually lose the capacity to do some research. I'm not prepared to say that yet. What we're talking about doing management-wise and with our division leadership team is to look at, is there a better way to structure how it is that we're doing research to make sure that we can make it more integrated into the operations of the agency while still protecting the integrity of research. So those are really serious discussions that we're having at a division leadership team to preserve and protect the integrity of the research that has been going on in this agency for a long time. We want to make sure that can continue to happen going forward. But we have to structure it in a way, for lack of a better way of putting this, that doesn't make that area of what we do a target.
Just real quickly before you, a couple people have said, please remind people, the speakers, to hold the mic closer. They're having a hard time hearing, and this is not me. It was a female who said it, especially the females, so. I guess that's you.
Sorry.
Okay, so I think he was next, so here you go.
Hi, my question is about the people who are given the at-risk notices. I've been talking to some of them, and they feel like they haven't been told what will happen to them. And also they feel that the DNR administration is not going to bat for them or supporting them. And so what do you want to say specifically to the folks that are at risk? And what is the administration doing to prevent layoffs and support those at-risk staff? We've heard some things, but I just wanted to, I think folks could appreciate hearing it from you, Kathy, if you could.
Yeah.
Will you guarantee, like in the 95-96 reorg, where we had even more positions moved around, in that case, the secretary was George Meyer, and that helped us move forward from that point. He guaranteed there weren't going to be any layoffs in the agency. So I would ask, just the basic question is, can you guarantee that there won't be any layoffs of permanent and LTE staff as a result of this budget?
So here's what I can guarantee. I can guarantee that we and your management team are doing every single thing we can to address the human impact of this. That's what I can guarantee. So I would never, ever sit up here and tell you I can promise something that I don't think I can promise. Right? I've always been straight with you guys. And again, you might not like the message, and I understand the uncertainty, but I hope that I am relaying to everybody here and across the state of our commitment to the human side of this. Every single person, whether you're in the HR bureau, the payroll department, you're a customer service rep, you're a fish tech, whatever it is you do, has such a key role to play and an important impact on the lives of every single resident and visitor to our state. That message has now become part of my being since I've come in 4.5 years ago. And we have been very, very effective when we say going to bat for our employees. I hope you've heard some of the things that we've been doing, and there's a lot of things behind the scenes that I'm not privy to share. But to help, again, decision makers who control our purse strings understand that these are not just numbers on a page. This is services being delivered, jobs being created, and human lives impacted. I will tell you, this is the most difficult town hall I've done. Even worse than the Act 10 stuff for me. Because this is real. This is our family. And these are really, really tough conversations for us. And we're going to do every single thing we can. You have my personal commitment and every member of our team to make sure that we take care of our folks. You have my promise. Thanks.
I guess just to elaborate on that a little bit, too. You know, in looking at the number of 58 people at risk, let's just say that there's, by looking at the way that the at-risk system works and way bumping works and all that, because of seniority things and all that, there are some people that are more at risk than others just because of their seniority and all that. But so when we're looking at these jobs that are going on whiskers, let's just say that some thought may be given to the kinds of jobs that are going on whiskers and the kinds of things that are going to be a good fit for the folks that are most at risk. So if people want to know what the leadership team and what HR budget and others are doing, what you're seeing happening isn't just random acts. There's a fair amount of thought put to trying to come up with solutions to those that are most at risk. Just because the numbers you can see, there's like 18 and 10, 28 or so positions, okay, that were cut from those two bureaus, not 58. So there's a lot of people, probably more than half, are probably going to end up doing something pretty similar to what they're doing right now, maybe no different. So people just got to realize that. And for those that are truly kind of in a situation, we're working hard to give them. Now, people have got to go after these opportunities that we're putting out there too, because the fact of the matter is those positions were cut. And we can't do anything about that. So this is the opportunity now through these postings to try to take care of those people. So yes, people should be assured that some very specific actions are being taken to look out for them.
Thank you, Joe. And thank you to Amber and her team too, by the way. It's just been extraordinary. Yes, sir.
To Mike and maybe Joe or anyone else, you did a great job explaining the outcome of parks and the education that you went through with the legislators of turning that into a good news story, which I think everyone is or should be pleased with, because what is the DNR without a standout parks program? So similarly, from the science program, given that the department was founded on the conduct of sound science, what efforts are being taken, if any, and please be as concrete as possible, that you are taking or plan to take to turn the science services program into a good news story?
I can take that. Sure. Very active. Talking about the importance of independent research to our customers, most notably our license payers. We talk about bobcat research, bear research, predator research in our deer program. These are the things where we get most of our money, our funding to this agency from those license payers. That matters to them. That message has really resonated. So there is, again, stories out here in the atmosphere about we've come under fire for different science projects that have had some of our professionals' names attached to them that have come under criticism. We've been able to be the Alka-Seltzer on that indigestion to explain what happens in research and how someone's name and our agency affiliation might get tagged on there as the author or a party to that research, but yet it was something done outside of the agency. So we've been able to manage that. But again, without being able to have those opportunities to have those discussions, we'd really be in a world of hurt. That's why it's important to remind everybody the work that we've been doing by being a resource to decision makers instead of being looked at as either an obstacle to them or maybe an advocate for something that they're against has been really, really fruitful this time. Because they're bringing us in earlier and asking us questions earlier, not as early as we would have liked maybe on the science services side of things, and maybe a couple others as well. But now we're actually being trusted with the information that we're giving. That's a huge thing. That's taken us 4 years to build that up with some folks across the street. And we'll never be there all the way with all of them. But I can't worry about those. We just got to focus on the majority of them. So we have been advocating for the quality of work that goes on in our research division and making sure, again, structurally, how we do this moving forward is to make sure that we still have good sound integrity in our research that goes on in this agency because our very policies and the policies that happen across the street rely heavily on that. So we've been really strong advocates of that. That's been happening more behind, that hasn't received a lot of press coverage. And I guess I'm not surprised because I'm kind of a cynic when it comes to the angle that the press has gone on some of these things. It doesn't fit the narrative of walking away from science, right? So you won't see that in print. I can't help that. But we are absolutely doing that with lots of legislators. Go ahead, Greg.
Just going to add one thing to that as well. I know we've been kind of talking about some of the success stories, but I think, I guess this is where I get to wear Matt's hat, a little bit of darkness. This has been a tough budget. This has been a tough budget not only for the Department of Natural Resources, but for other agencies as well. So to think that there aren't going to be we had the position reductions, those are real position reductions. There's some funding reductions for a certain number of our programs. I think the reality is that there will be some things we aren't able to continue to do as an agency. But I guess I would offer the same assurance that the leadership team is fully engaged in trying to make sure that the implications on the programs that we are offering and that the work that we do are limited, so the impacts aren't as dire, so that we can continue to do that core work. We're fully all engaged on that, and that's separate from the budget process. We're not there yet with the full answer of what the budget will look like, but you have our commitment as a leadership team to continue to have those conversations.
I guess the other thing, the last week or so, the intensity has kind of gone up on the questioning from the Fiscal Bureau in relation to science services and the research functions within the department. So what we have been doing is fielding those questions from the Fiscal Bureau and then working with science services to provide a lot of background information, which you guys have done a great job of, very detailed tasks that you all are performing. All we're doing is acting for a conduit for you all to express and plead or make your case. So the information that you guys are providing, which describes all the tasks and functions that you do, is being forwarded directly to the Fiscal Bureau and is going to be part of the papers that they do and part of the responses that they give to legislators. So I think whether you feel like it or not, you actually are having your day in court with this direct conduit to the legislature right now as well, because I know you guys have given us a ton of stuff, and that's getting to the legislature too. So it's not just the need for the table to do it. And, you're also doing it and are very much part of the process right now as it goes on.
Okay, I'm a research scientist, and I'm an LTE. So I was one of the people who got the letter a couple weeks ago letting me know I could be impacted by the at-risk process. I have two questions. First, I'd like to know how many LTEs total are in those 4 categories, because my understanding is that if a single research scientist is laid off, all the LTEs in that category will be laid off. But you said, so that's my first question, how many LTEs are impacted? And you said that's not a foregone conclusion, Amber. So could you give us some detail about possible ways we would not be laid off?
It's 116 total out of those 4 classifications. And when I say it's not a foregone conclusion, it's because we don't know whether we are going to actually have to lay anybody off in those classifications. You're correct that if we do have to cut somebody who is an FTE, that we have to release the LTEs in that classification first.
But we don't know yet.
Right.
Yeah, does Mike have anything?
Okay,
Sure. Yeah, go with the ones. That's
Because there are
fine.
probably a lot of duplicates, I would imagine.
A number of our positions are tied to federal
Can't hear you,
grants.
love. Sorry.
A number of our positions are tied to federal grants with specific obligations that come with those grants. What is going to happen with those federal positions, and the consequence of deciding not to do something that is part of our federal obligation?
I guess, are you talking about specific grants, or are you talking about like PR, SFR type grants?
I'm talking about in environmental quality. A lot of our work is funded through our federal grants that have expectations. So reductions in that filter up to the federal level. Our federal positions in a special status, will those positions go away? And I'm wondering about the ties to the real work that we're being paid to do.
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on the final mix of the positions that are cut. And so we'll have to do an evaluation of the linkage between specific grants and the bodies needed to perform them, and then how we can best meet the obligations of those grants. And then there's going to have to be a priority decision made on, do we have the staffing to perform these? If, in most cases, I'm assuming that we would make every effort to continue the completion of the work on those, but I guess we'd have to probably look at it on a case-by-case basis and see what we can and can't do. We of course don't want to lose federal money, and if there is an ongoing level of work that's justified tied to that grant, like I say, I just would need to know more about what it is before we could actually put together a package of what we would do.
That's where administrators are going to come in, obviously. So these decisions aren't being made just in the Secretary's office. This is a real leadership team-wide discussion that we've been having, so that we want to make sure we understand exactly what the ramifications are. So these are all very educated decisions that are being made, and again, in great part to the input of staff, to help explain exactly what it is that is the nexus between the federal dollars, the work that's actually being performed as a result of getting those dollars, et cetera. Pat, did you say Pat?
Yeah.
Did you want to expand on that maybe a little bit, if we can get Pat a microphone?
Sure. Thanks. I'm Pat Stevens. I'm the WARE Division Administrator, and our programs, we have 3 programs, all of which rely quite heavily on federal dollars. Just want to assure you, as we look at that, that's things that the management team talks about all the time. How are we doing in regard to earning our federal grants and trying to balance the vacancies that we have to target and fill those vacancies that we need to meet those grant commitments. So just be assured that that's something, again, that the programs are tracking very carefully. We're very aware of that, and we're doing the best we can to try to direct resources so we do meet those federal commitments.
Thanks, Pat.
Got a number of them here about legislators acting on misinformation or not having whole information wanting to know what we as an administration and secretary's office are doing to provide that information. I think we've hit on that. If we haven't, just expound a little bit. Tim is doing a fantastic job with our legislators, Joint Finance Committee members, but it's not just the 16 members who serve on Joint Finance Committee. Anybody can have their budget buddy introduce a budget motion. So it's really servicing 132 legislators and doing that both reactive to questions, but also proactively getting in front of them, giving them information. This process started, and I think I sound like a broken record, but this process really started last summer when we started putting together our county impact papers, and continued through with our DNR 101 with new legislators, and then continued with all of our personal one-on-one visits. And it wasn't just a stop-in one-time one-on-one visit with Joint Finance Committee members when they were announced. This has been an ongoing process that we've spent many hours educating. And it was striking at Management Cabinet this week. Each one of the agencies went around and talked about what their agencies have done in terms of reaching out to legislators on Finance Committee, reaching out to legislators in leadership positions within the legislature. And one agency who I'm not going to shame says, well, we sent them a letter. And I looked at Kurt and said, oh my gosh, wow. We've been, burning up the phone lines. We've been camped out over in their offices. We kind of joke that we're going to have an annex over in the East Wing because we've been spending so much time camped out over there. So it's an ongoing process. And sometimes when a legislator votes against a position that we are advocating for or explaining to them, I shouldn't say advocating for, you're right.
We're educating.
Educating them about, thank you.
Thank you.
It doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have the information. It may mean that they disagree with what our position is. It may mean that their district disagrees with what our position is. And we can only do as much as we can do to make sure that they have the information to make an informed decision. Sometimes individuals in life have disagreements. It's surprising. I disagree with my wife on certain things. So to say that a legislator and an agency aren't going to agree on every budget motion that comes before them, it's not surprising that sometimes they're going to act in a way that is not the way that we were educating on.
And again, they're looking at it global, right? So they've got lots of different people coming at them. Education, we talked about these, medical assistants, lots of needs out there that they're trying to juggle too. So they're not just focused on DNR, and that's why we have to continue to be a squeaky wheel, which we've been doing. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Oh, do you have a microphone yet?
I don't. I'll just stand up and yell.
No, you can't. They can't hear
They
you.
can't hear, yep.
Hi, thank you. I'm just curious about this term budget buddies. Maybe you explained it and I...
Sure.
Who are they? Are they legislators or are they staffers or are they
Both houses
you?
have a lead for agencies or different subject areas, topical areas. So they will take the lead on that, all of the different things that are going on in that area. So they'll be the compiler of all the motions that are coming from their colleagues. They're the conduit between the agencies and their colleagues. They're also the ones who are leading on those efforts when they are caucusing with their colleagues before the meetings occur. They have what are called pre-meetings where they discuss the motions that are going to be brought up, the information that they have on those issues. So each house has a lead on different topical areas or different agencies.
Budget buddies.
Budget buddy.
The rest of the committee relies on those individual leads to have more expertise and that their staff does more research into the papers in their areas because, otherwise you've got 16 members, everybody's got to be an expert in everything. And so then they just fall back and kind of take the lead from that person who's the expert in that area, right?
Right.
So we've heard about, I'm also a research scientist in LTE. We've heard talk about an FTE layoff affecting LTEs in the same classification. We've been told in previous meetings that DLT would seek a waiver for DNR LTEs to be exempted from this rule. I'm wondering whether that request has been made and what the status is of it. And along those same lines, I'm wondering whether legislators have been made aware of the magnified effect of FTE layoffs on DNR because of DNR's reliance on LTEs, many of whom have been here 5, 10 years or more. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I can take that one. Have we looked at potential waiver, and have we communicated that? Yes. We have not seen any positive reaction to that request. As far as the, so that kind of speaks to the waiver part. And then the second part of the question?
Whether legislators have been made aware of the magnified impact on DNR because of DNR's heavy reliance on LTEs.
Yes.
Been here for a lot of years.
Yes, yes, and yes.
Yes.
Much as I think you saw with the, I think it's 2 budgets ago, with our, the advocate, when Secretary Stepp, Gundy, Matt were across the street advocating for educating.
Thank you.
Educating. Well, that was back then. No, we still weren't.
Yeah, right.
But for I think it was benefits for LTEs, that has been a constant mantra that's carried forward to now. So we've definitely been telling that story. I think telling that story is what helped some with the actions that Joint Finance took this past week. So yes, we're doing everything we can to educate them on LTEs, the reliance on LTEs within our agency. I'm just sorry I can't report that there was any other actions taken in regards to a more broad action.
Okay.
How many of the at-risk positions are supported by GPR, and how many are supported by other sources?
We just can't hear out here. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah. How many of the at-risk positions, both LTE and FTE, are supported by GPR, and how many are supported by other sources such as federal funding? How much money is being saved in total by these cuts, and in particular, how much GPR will be saved by these cuts?
I don't know the specific numbers on that, but I don't have it with me. I mean, I'm sure we could get the breakout.
Plus, we don't know the positions. I mean, we don't know exactly what the...
We know the appropriations, though, which would be the revenue source.
Okay.
So, but, you know, the fact of the matter is there's probably not a lot of GPR positions involved in this position reduction, just because the department doesn't have that many GPR positions anymore. And there are federal positions involved as well. So, I mean, I think your point is, what is this cut contributing to the deficit, the GPR deficit? And the answer is probably not a lot. But I think that, you know, there was more of a goal of, you know, as Kathy has said, right sizing, you know, and it was that kind of a thing.
Well, and here's the other thing. I mean, remember, in like our EMA, Environmental Management account, the Fish and Wildlife account, there have been long-running structural deficits for a long time. So Fish and Wildlife change that went through finance last week was, and same with EMA changes, was about getting our expenditure authority in line with what it is that the revenues were coming in. So it's not necessarily about saving money as it is of balancing the books more, if you will. So while forever, or for 10 years at least, in the environmental management account, we've been given this authority to spend this much money, so we've got all these vacant positions out there, right, which we haven't filled because we haven't had the money coming in to fill the bucket to fund those positions. So the legislature's like, look, the way it's looking, you're not going to get that money coming in anytime soon. So let's get, you know, your expenditure authority in line with what the projected income is going to be to that account. So is that, did I explain that simply enough? Same thing with Fish and Wildlife account. Forever, it's been the same thing. It's like, you know, there hasn't been enough money coming into those coffers of those segregated accounts to be able to fund some of those positions, and so they've forced us to reduce some of those vacancies that we've had out there for a while.
I guess just to add one thing too, one of the things that were also included with each of the motions as it pertained to the Fish and Wildlife account, and then also for the environment, actually it was for the Parks account, was to come back with a study in a certain period of time to explore other alternatives to address that deficit. So that's another opportunity for us to engage staff as well as stakeholders as we try to figure out a longer term plan to try to to try to address that deficit. Just one second.
Got a whole bunch of hands up behind you. Okay.
As a scientist in DNR, who's on the layoff list, I've worked here for 35 years. My main concern is what's happening to the DNR with this, and I'm wondering how do we define the core issues and the glitzy issues at this point? They're going to redirect our efforts in science.
Well, those are discussions that we're having at the administrative division leadership team. So it's about, and this is going on not just in the science research area of the agency, but throughout the agency. Again, this is our reality, is that, you know, we've got more work to do that's being required of us, whether it's statutorily through state stuff or federal statutes or rules, whatever it might be. So we've got to first of all define, I think, with more laser focus than what we've had to do lately, if you will, on what are the core responsibilities and requirements that are of the agency. And then we've got to look at our workforce, and then we've got to decide what other capacity is there to do other things that we like to do. So when I say glitzy, I don't mean that to sound disrespectful, because I think that was the word you used. What I'm talking about is some of, like, you know, lots more press releases about, I don't know, different events going on different properties, for an example, which that's a great thing to share the message of. I've been talking about share the good news stories, right? I've been saying that for 4 years, and we've been doing that. But the legislature's like, look, you must have a lot of capacity there. You guys need to get back to your core focus of being a regulatory agency, right? Which is really our core functions, most of them, as well as management of, you know, fish and wildlife and natural resources. So there's always going to be kind of this gray area of what's core deliverable and what's, you know, maybe a little bit outside that. But that's going to be for the management team to be talking about. So this isn't going to be just Kathy and Mike and Kurt. This is an agency-wide effort with your leaders in your divisions who understand better than anybody the core work that you do.
And if I could just pick up on one comment there too in that last question about caring for the agency.
Yeah.
Please don't for a second think that any member of our DLT doesn't have the same goal of our appreciation, the care that we have for this agency while we're here. So that is going to be a commitment that we carry into every one of our discussions. The future of this agency, to make sure this is a strong DNR moving forward. So I just didn't want that to slip.
Your DLT members will be here long after I'm gone and have been here long before I got here. Some of them longer than I am old.
Especially John G.
Like John G., for example, who's celebrating his 35th anniversary with the department. So congratulations to John. That's the guy who's been here longer than I am old. Don't say anything.
Okay.
So,
And she's younger than me.
yeah, that's how it works. Yes, ma'am.
I want some clarification because I can't help but be confused about trimming the fat and bringing down the amount of people in state government. But my understanding is the 17 science positions, it was a senator up north that asked the governor to go after certain positions within science services regarding deer, regarding bobcat, regarding climate change. And so when I hear that we're trying to reduce the amount of positions, but then I hear that there are people that are asking the governor to reduce those positions specifically, I don't know what to do about that.
So let me help you with that. I read the same article, and anything I read in the media, I have a very jaded lens.
But I also understand that it was on video as well.
Well, that could be, but again, this is the reality, right? We are the implementers of the elected officials, right? And their desires and wills and the places that they want to see us focus our energies. The best that we can do, and we're doing that, is to educate them on the value of the work that we do. That's why I've been pounding the pavement, 135,000 miles on my car in 2.5 years, telling about, and I do this very pointedly, about the importance of the work that you all do on a daily basis to everybody's day. From the minute they wake up and hit the snooze on their alarm clock, it's because of power and energy, and we have a lot to do with that. They wet their toothbrush with clean water, don't have to think twice about it. It's because of the work that we do on regulating, right, water quality standards, etc. Getting in their car, air quality, on and on and on we could go, right? No one's ever made those connections before. So we have a long road to go when it comes to educating decision makers in that building on the importance of the work that we do, and we've made tremendous strides. That's why we're not seeing what we, are always planning for the worst. We're thinking that we were going to see. Will we ever be able to convince every single elected official to support all the things that we do? Never. I could never set that goal because we'd never achieve it. But what we can do is we can influence enough members of the legislature to where maybe some voices might not have as much impact as they would have had we not done that legwork. How is that?
It's good, thank you.
I mean, I think what they're talking about, what the situation you're talking about is a perfect example of what Mike was talking about earlier, which is you can attempt to educate an individual as much as you want, but if they're philosophically are so much ingrained into a particular approach to something, it just wouldn't matter. It doesn't matter. So the answer to your question is yes, it's confusing, and yes, it's difficult to deal with. But the fact of the matter, that's just the reality of what we're dealing with.
But the fact of the matter for me is that those positions are being politically targeted. It's not just to reduce the amount of positions in the DNR. Those positions are under political target because of what. So
Guys, everything we do in state government is politics. We work for politicians. Right?
Politicians set our budget.
They do. They
set
control
our
our
policies.
budgets, right? The things that we're supposed to work on, different rules, et cetera. Go ahead, Kurt.
And I just wanted to clarify something, because this came up at the staff advisory team meeting as well, about individuals that may have their sights on a specific person or a specific position. Please know that we are looking at numbers on a spreadsheet and accounts that we need to try to achieve our reductions. Factoring into that isn't someone's perception on the outside of what they would like to see done. We are going to manage that, and we're going to make sure that we make decisions that are it's the best for the agency within the sideboards that we have. So that's something else that I had heard, and I just want to make sure that that's addressed as well, is that if someone has identified a person, whether it be in print or on the radio, TV, that's not the directions that we're taking. We're making sure that we're making sound management decisions. So I just want to make sure that that was addressed as well today.
Thank you, Kurt. Good point. Thank you. Someone else in the room, did I see? Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you for fielding these difficult questions. Over the last few weeks, our policy management team has gone through the prioritization for our program, and after hours and hours of discussion and late night emails and Sunday afternoon conversations, we realized that past efforts have narrowed us down to our very core work. There is nothing left to prioritize. We are doing our core work. And the regional staff and the central office staff is so intricately connected in what we do that there's no way to cut out anything we do. We're currently, with our lapses and our potential non-filling of our vacancies, 15 to 30% down in staff. So if we're going to continue doing what we have been doing, our core work, we're only going to be able to we'll be doing 15 to 30% less of that.
Yeah.
So when I have staff in the field who are fielding 80 phone calls a week on complaints of septage spreading, we have a few facilities that are dominating our individuals' times. What is the messaging we send to our regional staff in doing less of the work we do? We're not going to be able to respond to all the complaints.
Right.
We're not going to be able to get back to phone calls within 24 hours or emails within 3 days. What do I tell my staff?
So here's why we're having you go through those exercises program by program, is so that we can help identify for decision makers what's got to go. And that's reality, right? But I can't go running over there saying the house is on fire and not have a business case for why it is I'm saying so. And first of all, let me just qualify, that was not a good example to use. I'm not saying that our house is on fire, okay? But what I'm trying to say is, we've got to have sound data to be able to go back to decision makers, whether it's the governor's office, the legislature, so that they can they can see what some of the ramifications of these cutbacks would be. And that's why you're going through that. So for now, I would say to tell your folks in the region to keep hanging in there with us, because the information that you're gathering from them is helping us make a good business case on what the needs are of the agency, and will help us prioritize where we put feet into the boots to get them on the ground. So it's grueling, I get it, but it's going to help us make better decisions, so thank you.
Hi, thank you. I just want to follow up on a question that was raised over here that touches a very important issue, bigger than budget, I think, and that is education of legislators. In that regard, I was very discouraged to read in the DNR news summary yesterday a story from the Cap Times in which Senator Tom Tiffany of the Joint Finance Committee says that DNR does not do good science. That seems to me to cut to the heart of what so many of us here in this agency are doing. And I believe you that you're saying you're doing all that you can to educate these people. Apparently that's not working, at least in one case. What can you do to elevate this discussion to make sure it reaches a wider audience and to get our needs addressed?
So, like I've already addressed, and Joe's touched on it, Mike's touched on it, there's always going to be someone out there who doesn't like something that we're doing. And then our job is, if we can't influence change of opinion there, then we have to make sure we're reaching out collectively to the decision makers to make our case where it will be heard. And that's what we're doing. And, you know, you guys have all met somebody in your life that no matter what you say, they just don't agree with you, right? They're philosophically opposed to something or another, and you're not going to change that person's mind. I'm convinced that when we keep demonstrating to this particular senator the good work that's going on in that district and how that benefits his constituents, and we're continuing to do that, that maybe we won't change his mind all the way, but his constituents will learn. And that matters to elected officials. Yes, ma'am.
This question's for Mike. Earlier you mentioned this was one of the most successful budgets you thought so far. And I'm wondering if you can elaborate on that for all the FTEs, all the scientists, all the educators that are out here in this crowd today and that are out there listening as to why and how?
Sure. If you've looked at any of the papers, and I look at all of them, they all include, as Joe pointed out, the Fish and Wildlife account included a motion that would have reduced 26 positions and $2 million lapse from that Fish and Wildlife Spending Authority. Before we got engaged and involved in that, the tide seemed to be that the $2 million lapse was occurring and we were going to lose 26 positions in the first year of the budget. Added on top of everything that we were already having to deal with that was included in the budget. So when I say we were successful in being able to go over and explain our case, saying we can't handle, we as an agency are already dealing with position reductions and lapses. There's the capacity to add another 26 is limited. So we were able to get that reduced to 13 in the second year. The environmental management account included a number of papers that had reduced, 2 positions, 1 position, 4 positions, 5 positions. Last budget, I honestly believe that those would have passed. We were surprised last budget with a motion at the end of a day that said 32.1 vacant positions reduced. We haven't been surprised by a motion like that. It's not because this legislature is any less conservative than it was last time. It's because we've been even more proactive than we were last time in educating on what it is that we do, educating on what reductions in spending authority, reductions in staffing will mean within each individual legislator's district. And that these are the types of projects that we may not be able to do anymore.
So, successful probably wasn't the right term, right? Because I'm watching the body language in the room. So what Mike means by that is just, it's not as horrible as it could have been. That's what we're trying to say. Maybe that's probably a better way of putting it. Because I understand that while we say, whew, we dodged that bullet, there are people here who are still in the line of fire. And we probably should have chosen better words.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
I should have. That's a very
That's
good
what he was
point.
trying to coin, was just to kind of frame that. We didn't by any means mean, and I know he didn't,
No.
to minimize what's going on.
And I guess just sort of tack on to that, there are lots of things that happen behind the scenes that we don't talk about publicly because it impacts our ability to be proactive in the future and educate legislators in the future. There were motions that we were sweating bullets on, and I'm looking at a couple of division administrators who are nodding. And while we still have horrors that are in here, to take Kathy's words, we were successful in limiting additional reductions and those types of things. So I didn't mean to say that we should go out in the
We're not
streets
doing
and party.
cartwheels here.
No.
Yeah.
But we've dodged some additional issues that we would have had, and as I'm looking at division administrators, they're smiling and nodding because we were preparing for horrors, as Kathy put it.
Horrors.
Horrors.
Needed to enunciate that a little bit better.
Horrors.
Thank you. One more question. Then, by the way, I know we're not getting to everybody's questions, okay? Do we have a special mailbox that we set up for questions after this town hall or
They're
not?
coming in, and then they get addressed via the resource.
Okay, so we will be addressing the questions, just, because I know we're short on time. Okay, who gets the last question? Yes, sir. Oh, good.
It came to my attention in the last year and a half, maybe 2 years, that there was some great reluctance to complete education planning for fisheries and possibly other programs. People who were going to be doing the education were excluded from whatever planning was going on. And it seemed to me now, since your administration has made the decision to kind of throw the educator positions off the plane, that it's been known for a long time that education was no longer a core part of the DNR mission. And I'm wondering why the educators weren't brought into that, weren't notified of that a year and a half ago, a year ago, so they could have much more of an opportunity rather than waiting till this last minute to get into a position that would be part of the core mission.
Can I address that one?
Please.
So probably about a year and a half ago, we did indicate that we were going to start an education, I think an all-agency education strategic planning effort, because we had already been getting some winds of some concerns over our programming. So we did start that process. What we decided to do is that at that same time, the McKenzie Center, if you know, the Department of Natural Resources took over responsibility for running that facility. The decision was made because McKenzie Center was going to be a core part of that education mission, that we wanted to focus on the McKenzie strategic planning effort first. And we put the other process on hold so that we could address McKenzie first. So that's kind of the timeline of how things transpired regarding that planning effort. Was there any indication that we were going to be in this position that we were with position reductions in this budget for educators? No, that wasn't on the radar. What we did know is that we needed to put an effort into prioritizing what education did take place and where we did education within the department. We're still going forward with that strategic planning effort for McKenzie, and we have every intention, and now it's been accelerated a little bit, once this budget is finalized, to take a look at our education offerings within the department too, to make sure we're prioritizing the work that we do there. So that's kind of an explanation of what transpired and where we are now.
I want to wrap up question.
Who said that?
Jordan. A wrap-up question for me. How was the fishing on Saturday, Jordan?
and I'm asking this solely for myself. I'm not representing any other larger group, and in part because of the position that I hold in the agency. I get the whole smaller government perspective. I mean, it's not in our control, so I get that, and I'm accepting that. But some of your answers and decisions that are being made seem counterintuitive, not straightforward logic, because a lot of the decisions that are being considered are going to do nothing but further distance the agency from our public. And when you do, you, in parentheses, meaning myself and my colleagues, do check-ins with the public, one of the things that we regularly hear is that we don't know what you're doing. Oh, we didn't know that. What are our funds being used for? That kind of connection. And the reduction of whether it's communicators or educators or scientists seems to result in nothing, or potentially result in nothing but further distancing the agency from the public. So, what is the leadership team doing to minimize that distancing?
So what I'm going to ask is for you, because you've all sat through many town halls over the past 4 years, and one is what is and what has been Secretary Stepp's one of her primary areas of emphasis. Communication, education, customer service. Do you think it's any way a bit difficult now to see and hear from a legislature saying, we think that there's other priority work that you need to focus on? Yeah, but what we have to understand, and this will be part of my closing comments, is that there is still a legislature making decisions and setting priorities for us. And so what, at the end of this budget process, we'll be doing is we'll be taking that guidance and that we will try to figure out how to still perform great customer service and communicate and educate to the extent possible that we have within the sideboards that they've set for us. That's about the best I can do, Jordan. I understand your comments, but please know that that commitment and desire to continue to do those things is still there. However, we also have to understand that there is a large board of directors within the state elected by the citizens of the state that are going to be setting the priorities for us. And this is another one of those budgets, and it's happened before.
Thank you, guys. Again, if you've got other questions, maybe either you didn't feel comfortable asking them in a big group or people out in the field, I'm hoping some of those were duplicates from what was coming from the room here. So we'll do our best to get answers back out to you on the resource. And again, I encourage you to, if you hear rumors out there, to reach out, and we'll help set those straight. And again, when you're reading things in the media, just to kind of take it with a grain of salt for now, and hopefully we've made clear to you today that just how engaged we are and committed to the sustainability and the future of this fantastic agency. So thank you, everybody, for all you do. Have a good day.
Thank you.